Hey, everybody out there. Welcome to the Complete Solution Group Happy Hour podcast. We have Miss Nathalie Asher on with us today. Nathalie is a military veteran, having served as a Russian linguist for the U.S. Army. She was a field office director for the Seattle field office and a former executive associate director for ICE enforcement removal operations. And as a side note, Nathalie was a predominant mentor for me as I was climbing the ranks in ICE. And she was the one who pushed me to become a senior executive and a field office director. So we're really happy to have her on today. She is outstanding. She's high energy. She's always been just this, great person to be around. And again, we are just, truly excited to have her on the program today. So Martinez is going to kick it off and we'll have Nathalie on.
Well, Fab, right now I'm starstruck. I'm not going to lie. Starstruck over here. So, no, Nathalie, I met Nathalie 14 years ago when I was a very young staff officer in Washington, D.C., and that's the first time Nathalie and I crossed paths. And like you said, she was a mentor of mine as well. Once I joined that executive ranks, I had Nathalie to work off of. So it's an honor to have her on the show. She's a great friend, and I can't wait to hear more. So on that note, I'll turn it over to you, Miss Asher. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Even better talking to you two. So awesome to see you again. What's so cool about this, right? We've all got this history with one another, met each other through different paths, and we can go weeks, months, just kind of peripherally knowing what everybody's doing. But you come back on like this, and I feel like I saw you two just yesterday. Best feeling ever. Doing great. And thank you for having me today. This is fun.
Yeah, no, this will be great. And if you can too, for all those folks out there who are listening in who don't know who Nathalie is, can you kind of help everyone how you started your career, getting to where you are today?
Sure. First and foremost, all of this happened without a plan. That's just straight up. And I think sometimes without a plan is the best plan. I just happened to be most of the time at the right place at the right time, or sometimes in my brain, I thought at the wrong time, like, why am I getting sucked into certain things? But just essentially just not really having a plan per se that allowed those above me and around me that could perhaps see what I did not see in myself to push me forward, to challenge me, which is something that I hope that I did well, particularly in my 25 years in law enforcement, pushing into the supervisory and leadership roles, that I always was scanning the horizon, trying to do the same thing that I thought, happened for me back in the day. Like I said, I had zero plan to go to the direction that I was. I was a geeky nerd student. I was pre-med. I went to college thinking, I was, smarty pants in high school. I was going to do the same in college. So not listening to my dad, I took a full load of all the science courses and all of that. That didn't go well. That was just too much. And so with that, always had an opportunity, an ability to learn languages easily. Fortunately, my mother spoke French with me only growing up. I went to German schools. I was trilingual as a young kid. So the brain was already conditioned for that. So fell back into that, what I did well, went into finishing off with languages, and frankly after that, I went home and really didn't have a plan. My dad is a retired full bird colonel. I grew up in the military, lived on several continents, went to a ton of schools, and found that is what I resonated towards. The fact that the thing of like staying in one place for too long, I just didn't know how to process that. I mean, going to 11 schools as a kid, that just, So much to the horror, and I mean horror, of my mom, I took a detour, went to the recruiter's office, walk in, and they thought I was lost. This was like in 1985. I don't even know if you guys were born then. Is that 85? Something like that. I walk in, these dudes are sitting there, and I had some little, nondescript little office job where I'm in my goofy suit from the 80s, the big shoulder pads, the big hair. And they thought I was lost. And I said, no, I'm here to talk about being in the military. that felt pretty good because they were all coming after me. Understood why later, right? Sad to say, I don't know since then that the stats have changed so much as well as in law enforcement of women being that significant of a percentage of the overall rank and file, right? So they got to get their little credits for the month. And whoever, gets the female signed up, I would imagine, that's an extra day off or something. So all coming after me, uh, whittled it down, looked at the possibilities, and I was pushed by all of them that I came out. Imagine, as parents, I come out, I've got a college degree, and they're all encouraging me we can do OCS, no big deal. But what troubled me about that route was I have a little bit of a control freak issue. And it's like, well, you go in and then you go needs of the military. And that I did not like because and every branch and every uh, job within is significant, but I wanted to be picky with that. So that I was coming out with already 3 languages under my belt. The best offer was with the Army. So I joined enlisted at 24 years old, post college. My mom is in France. We were still writing on tablets back then. There were no phones or anything. My mom's with our family and she comes back and my dad is helping me through all this. And I go, well, I just joined the military. Oh, okay. Well, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm going to go to boot camp here pretty soon. 24. And I've got 2 girls now. If my girls will walk through the door again, you know, I have no regrets, but you're thinking, what is your kid doing? Best thing I ever did. I tested for languages and I went the Russian route, was at DLI, for Monterey for a year, did all that thing, had a wonderful opportunity to excel in the military as an enlisted uh, service member, finished up at the National Security Agency, thought that was going to be my career. This was 1992 when the wall came down. All of a sudden, we were going to be friends with the Soviets. So, literally, my headphone and the frequencies that I had been following and knew so intimately throughout my duration, like, doop, doop, all turned off. So, I just thought, okay, I'm going to be sitting in this because this is what happened oftentimes with individuals in that career field is today you're military, the next day you go GS, right? Because it's a very all the clearances, all that stuff, all that, you know, um, well, that didn't happen. That was not the opportunity. So I decided to get out. I was going to go back to school to become a midwife because I was still kind of just, back into my interest of obstetrics and wanting to be the hero and deliver babies and all this crazy stuff. So I was going to go to school to become a midwife. And the FBI came knocking because they were looking for people with languages. And so I was an intel analyst with the FBI in one of their sub agencies. And it just one thing led to another. I was working on a project that brought me out to the Seattle area. And I happened to do a white paper on Russian organized crime and its impact on the Pacific Rim, which, full disclosure, I picked this area because my best friend lived here. It just, I'm telling you, all these things, right? Plans, whatever. I come out here, I don't know, I had to present this paper in 95. Back in the day, you guys remember when it was INS, the district directors were basically fiefdoms, right? They could do whatever. They had their own control of positions. They did all these things. So the district director of the Seattle office was at this meeting that I went to for in Canada, and he had an appreciation for intelligence, which you both know. Oftentimes, I think the world of intelligence, military intelligence, intelligence within the law enforcement arena is usually sort of like second chair to the badasses, the front end, and all this stuff. I was the back end geek crunching the stuff, handing it to the special agents so they could go waltzing in and look all good to the AUSA, and then we just keep crunching in the background. That's what I did. And I was just matter of factly talking about how it's so beautiful out here and I was on my way to Houston to be a supervisory intel analyst for JDIG, Joint Drug Intelligence Group at the time. And, like a district director can do, it's like, do you like it out here? Yeah, I love it out here. Do you want to come work out here? Uh, yeah. Okay, I got a 132 intel analyst position. When can you come out? Well, I have 2 little children, and well, listen, you call me and tell me when you want to come out. That was it. Like, that was it back in the day. And then when I came out here, moved out here in 96, there was nothing. You guys know, for INS, there was no such thing. What do you do with a 132? And I'm going to tell you something. Part of this whole women, and I come flying in here, and I'm just used to doing what I do before. And he goes, you're going to start coming to meetings with me because we're trying to work some things that are connected back in the day to San Ysidro, all this stuff. And so I had telephone toll analysis experience and, going through trash and putting puzzles together, which is the coolest thing. So you're going to go to these meetings with me. So I come flying in. Again, it's still big hair days, sort of, kind of, and I have big hair anyway. Now, and I'm used to these clowns, these guys, these officers. Now I'm called Vanna White. Well, the district director brought in Vanna White. And I'm just thinking, okay, that's okay. Because again, after 7 years in the military, we got to work a little harder. Females do. That's just, but you know what? Like my dad always said, guys are kind of knucklehead-ish. And so if you understand that going in, then you got to work harder, be assertive, confident, know your stuff better than they do, exude confidence. You got it. You got it. And always maintain your integrity. That was it. That's what he said to me. That's what he said to my little sister. My little sister is a retired full bird badass who did embassy duty in Bolivia and Argentina. She worked for Southcom. She used to brief General Kelly. Okay, so I came from a great mentor as my dad to tell us, if this is what we want to do, you can do it, but you just got to do certain things that you've got to just buckle down and work harder. So, okay, I'm Vanna White. My hair's flipping around, whatever. And through that opportunity, did some really cool work for INS because it was so easy to flourish because nobody knew what to do with all the information in the A files to put together organization, just stuff that really wasn't a predominant part of the mission set back in the early 90s, as you both well know. So that just sort of evolved. And, like I told you, sometimes you just don't realize when people are almost handing you something. And it's not that I was aloof about it. It was just, okay, this is what I'll think about it. In 97, I had then Legacy INV, sort of the investigative side, the what do they call them then? The pre-ICE, whatever that job was, AA under the district directors, the assistant deputy, whatever that was, of investigations. Say, you need to come over you need to be a special agent, right? The whole thing. Like, we can use your skill set, this and that. And it just, again, it just wasn't the time because I had a private life to balance, my personal life, my kids, my husband at the time was also moving up. And so it's like, no, this is just not the time. My children were little. They were 8 and 4. I thought, no, because I love what I'm doing, because I get to do whatever I want for the district director in this realm of intel. The following year, where I kept being asked to come and help, was in Legacy DDMP, detention and deportation. Are you guys both DDMP? I can't remember.
No, when I came over it was DRO, and then like the next week we became ERO.
Okay, see how long this has been? And I would be pulled in basically for my language, my skill set. We would get Haitians in, come in and do the French. We would get, Russians, which wasn't the best, but it would still, I could read the documents, Spanish, all this kind of thing. And I really felt a pull because language is talking, which means you're interacting with people. And as you both know, ERO, our commodity is people. And you have to know how that's what we work constantly. And so I was polarized to that. And then I would become very interested in the facility aspect of things, talking with people, the detainees, putting things together. So that the assistant director of then DRO, same thing, came to me and said, "You need to become now. You need to be a DO." But there's this little thing called age, and no offense, Miss Asher, but you're kind of getting up there for the mandatory. I got into basic 6 days before I turned 37.
Oh, wow.
So I was the oldest one in the class. But it was just and their basic wasn't like the basic I was used to. And so I'm trying to go by all these rules and get in and do these things. I'm such a control freak. But got out of that, came back to Seattle, really had a wonderful career because I had really good bosses who 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 would let us work things that we were best at. It wasn't so siloed. And as a result of all of that, I sort of landed into the whole poker world when we had to do the post order, the famous Zadvidas and Ma, all of that stuff. That's what I worked as DO. And so that's basically coming up to the DO piece. But I guess it's just to tell you that I didn't have this hard thing of this is what you're going to study, this criminal justice, this is what you're going to pursue. It's just, I think, with the influence of people who saw mostly of perhaps what I could bring to the table, is just kind of what led me into this path.
So
One that
when did you
so
decide that being in leadership in ICE ERO was going to be more of your career path? Because when I had initially met you, it was I think in fugitive operations training.
Yeah.
You were a field officer. You were working fugitive operations. You were making arrests on the street. And then I remember hearing that you went back to Seattle, and then you got into supervision, and then your career path just projected from there. So when did you decide that hey I want to be in a leadership role inside ERO?
So I think a lot of that is you can be a leader without having the title. In fact, you guys know, you recall your time up, you would always scan and look at your officers who tend to stand out that way. You've got your technically savvy, and you've got your other ones who can lead the people, may not be as technically savvy, but they know how to lead those that are the savvy ones to get things done, right? And they're not even in the title. That is essentially what happened, I think, in my ranks, is that just and frankly, the skill set that women can bring to some of this stuff, just multitask oriented, um, wanting to help up and wanting to help down, and being that link, I think, is what was recognized by my leadership at the time. And so it just seemed like the logical progression for me, because now I was essentially acting like a supervisor and oftentimes put in the position as acting. So position came open, you just, that's what happened. And then that was in 2007 when we went through this huge restructure of all of the AFOD positions came showering down and all of that. And I wanted to be part of that building of a new era of leadership change. And again, I worked for a phenomenal field office director, Mr. Neil Clark, may he rest in peace. Sometimes the most crotchety, grumpy, like drive me insane. My goodness, he just sometimes would just blow open the doors and go, "Okay, Asher, you said you think you can do this, then just go try it and come back to me." I loved that. So that's how I moved into the AFOD ranks and did that for a while. And my military brain, you're supposed to do every position as you move up, right? So the logical position after AFOD would be TFOD. AFOD was working for me. I loved that length of, you're not losing too much touch with the troops, but you are the link to the senior managers. And again,
And that's an assistant field office director for our listeners that may not know what AFOD is.
yeah. And right? I could talk to the troops. I was still familiar enough to talk to the troops, make sure the supervisors were getting the clear messaging of what was being asked by senior leadership. I really loved doing that go-between job, loved it. So I thought, okay, well, whenever something's going to happen, and I was at the right place, my daughters had already moved on to young adult life. So I thought, whenever the deputy field office director position, maybe I'd put in whenever that came open. Well, that's not how things happened. It was the field office director position that came open. And I was highly encouraged by the outgoing field office director, and some people in headquarters. I'm getting these calls. We don't see your name on the application. I'm like, well, I'm an AFOD. That's not. So mentoring, pushing. And I'll tell you, I went to my DFOD, my boss, and I told him I'm putting in as well. I just didn't feel, I'm just going to put in. We'll see what happens. October 2010, I became the field office director in Seattle. That was it. That's how it happened. And, you know, we we could go on and on about, the headquarters. You guys did all that stuff.
So what was your take then, knowing how you came up through the ranks like us? Like you see the apertures like only open so much as an officer, and as a supervisor gets a little bigger, and all of a sudden as you go up there as an AFOD, you start to see the picture of what's going on, how headquarters comes back to the field, and they give us these operations. Now you're the field office director. What is it? To me, I always tell people it's like the Wizard of Oz. You get to pull back the curtain and actually see what's going on. And now you're in that position where you can actually make change at your level. What was that like? Once you left the AFOD position to go into the field director position.
No, that's spot on. I mean, that's when, and I think all of us understood that when we moved, right? The higher you go, in some respects, the higher you go, you're losing touch with what it is that we love to do the most, right? But you have to learn to let that go, because you're moving up to sort of play catcher and whatnot of all of the things that are raining in from headquarters, the local environment, all of that, to repackage, make it work for your midline bosses, managers, to get down to the troops for them to execute. And once you start seeing, okay, that's why headquarters before, because I would be mouthy on the occasion. I don't, but sometimes I put it on mute, because then I, like on conference calls, and just rant and then go back on and be all polite again. But I was learning, like, well, no wonder that tasking was so stupid. Well, now I get it, because they have a direction to follow, etc. So that's where I had to mature a little bit, right? Like, not going in ready to kick and scream and punch everybody and fix everything overnight, because there were more pieces to the puzzle, and there was a lot more to take into consideration of things that were beyond the control of ERO. So that was something I really had to just learn as I moved up. And it made more sense, because I would remember my bosses previous saying, well, we'd like to be able to do this at the local level, but we can't because we have these restrictions. And in the work that we've been in, right, you take the oath to uphold whoever's in the White House and who's ever in Congress and all of that. And you can't take things personally. You can have conviction, but at the end of the day, we execute 10-4, laws and policies. So
Let me ask you this question too. So what was your sense of the first time you went to Washington D.C. to work in the headquarters? To now you see the magic box from the inside out, and now again sitting in that chair when you're on those calls, they're telling you, "Hey, Natalie, you need to do X, Y, and Z. Do this." Now you're inside the palace where it's coming down. Like, what was your first, I guess, initial reaction when you were there? Like, I'll put it this way: what was the first 2 weeks like, being in Washington and actually understanding like how this game is played?
it's actually pretty comical, because you use a couple of terms. Magic Box Palace, because that's what I'm thinking. The first time I had to go up and on this poker stuff, and I think it was an SDDO, and they're having me go in there dealing with the 14s and 15s. Again, my military regimented brain, and no offense, because we've all been there, it's just reality. I'm thinking, these are headquarters people. So Mr. Clark would hear me say, I'd be on the phone and it'd be some DDO or someone up there. Yes, sir. Oh, yes, Mr. Smith. Okay. Hi, all this, Mr., all this. And just thinking like my chain of command, like that was my chain of command, talking to a DDO and all of that. And Clark told me, Nathalie, they are no different than all of us. They're just in headquarters positions. It's not as if they have that at that time when we were kind of smaller. You're equally qualified. That's why you're going to start getting detailed up there so you understand it's a revolving door of detailers. It's people who have been there perhaps far too long, who don't have touch with the field. So you can't become, it's not like a mystical, oh my God, you're walking into the emperor's, just, it's no different. So and in fact, you're bringing things to them that they don't know. And that's exactly when I walked in there. It's like, I had this vision, right? Because again, from my military, you're walking into SOCOM or some other kind of, or even the Border Patrol, you're like, damn, this is like structure. And I think I brought it down a few notches to not be so, I don't know what the word is, like enthralled because this is headquarters. Now, you're respecting the leadership positions and title and whatnot, but I think that was one of the big eye openers when I went up there at the start of what became many details, some short, some long, to the day of, here's your 3R letter, Miss Asher. Come on up.
So that was kind of like my next question. So how long were you serving in the field office director role until they said, Nathalie, you're more valuable to us in Washington than you are to Seattle? And that's kind of like the kiss of death. And I say that in jest, but you lose your ability, like you said. Like I always picture, the field office is like Game of Thrones. We all have our castle. They're hard to break in. We're all doing that. But now you have to give that up and now go to Washington. And actually, now you're actually driving policy. You're driving keeping this country safe. How long did you stay as a field ops director until they said, Nathalie, no more, you need to be here with us?
6 years.
Oh,
6.
okay.
Yeah. But of that, I was up there for 1 year because they had me come up to do a long-term detail. So I was familiar. And that 9 months plus gave me as the AD over mission support, no less. Come on, like a Leo over mission support. That made no sense, but it did later because I learned from the director at the time. I said, I'm not understanding, no offense, but you never brought a Leo in to oversee the mission support piece. And what I so loved about that detail, he gave me a punch list of 10 things that he wanted to see get accomplished. And he said, none of these require necessarily the technical expertise of that particular division. But what it does require is an overarching leader who can build coalitions and can help us translate to the other Leos what needs to happen and be a champion to those people in those support roles. I'm like, I'm all about that. I know is what I do well. It's just, and it's not brag. It's just, that's what I do well. And so going up there to get the 3R letter, I was a little, because, you get comfortable. And I thought when I got the call, I'm like, okay, I remember I was standing at my desk. I'm looking north. I can see the Space Needle. I'm all comfy, right? And he says to me, yeah, you're coming up. I need you to, I said, okay, 10-4. Because again, I was on so many details. And my AOR at the time was amazing. Like, a good indicator of a good leader is that you can leave and they know how to do their jobs.
Right.
Because when you leave and it falls apart, that's on you. Because clearly you did not let them do their jobs, right?
Right.
You got to lead and run the place as if you're going to get hit by a bus the next day. Plain and simple.
Yeah.
So
So Nathalie,
Yeah.
pivoting over to when you became the executive associate director, you were the first woman to hold that title in ERO. The
Still am.
first,
Still am.
still am. The only one, the only woman to hold that title. What was that like? Especially, I mean, you assumed that position under the Trump administration, held
Yep.
that position under the Trump administration, and there, the media was not being kind to us at the time. And I remember seeing you in a lot of media hits, and especially about juvenile detention and stuff. How was it being cast into that kind of environment as the first female in charge of the agency, and just having to deal with that kind of environment at the time?
That's a great question. Look, I'm not going to lie. Like, and again, I'm going to keep this clean. I mean, I'm telling you, I was scared, and that's okay to say that. Like, I just thought, what in the hell? What are they smoking? Why am I doing this? There were other people that were senior to me up there to move up these ranks and all of that. But again, I didn't have time to worry about why me. I had to hit the ground running, and um, it was a tumultuous time. But on the other hand, it when you've got a good team around you, um, that certainly helps those times of like questioning yourself or like what's going on here. And I really was fortunate that I was able to bring up a couple guys to have my back so that I could figure out what the frick I was doing from day one to day two. And when I say this, you become, especially as the EAD, for me, this could be for different. You know what? It's almost less about being a leader. I kid you not. You don't, because you don't have the autonomy as you do in the field. I mean, I loved being a field office director. Stuff comes out to you, you're like, yeah, whatever. You're able to fix it, customize it, clean it up to your AOR and to your people. Up there, you're at the top. It's like this constant, and right, you are more of like a shepherd leading this madness that's going on an everyday basis. And so having to pivot to that type of discipline, I never thought any differently. I didn't about, oh, well, now this is different because now I'm the first female and we should keep zinging in on that. Maybe I should have. I don't know. Time. We had shit to do. Like, I'm not going to start prancing around that my name is Nathalie Asher and I'm the first. I'm Nathalie Asher. I'm the EAD. I got shit to do. Honestly, it's just, but I think, again, bringing a female into all of that, just the ability to have, and I think I'd like to think at that point, I worked very hard on having the reputation, if you will, of being able to take a message and knowing how to customize it to my audiences. And I really learned that when I was AD over field ops, because at the time I'm dealing with 24 very type A clowns, and I was a clown too. 24. And it's one thing, and I'm getting screamed at, Asher, call so and so, right? And I knew the personalities for the most part where I could, customize what it is that needed to be said to each one so that they felt like I wasn't barking at them or all of that. And I think it was just applying that same skill set and not taking myself too seriously when I went into that position. Really. It sounds kind of sick, but that's the truth.
And you know something too, for people who are listening to understand how ERO works, Natalie had to oversee every detainee that was in custody throughout the country, had to push forward enforcement operations throughout the country. And then after that, the removals of everyone. I think a lot of people kind of get lost with what we do. They don't understand the vast scope of everything that you have coming at your desk every day from all these different programs. And then you're actually overseeing our assets overseas internationally throughout the country.
Mhm.
So every day, like you were saying, that assistant field office director position, you're dealing with 24 problems every day, every minute of the hour. And that's one thing with people don't understand in DC is there's never a day off because there's always something happening someplace in the country. Now the scope is bigger because now you're dealing with things going on in the world, around the globe. So I can just imagine you sitting there thinking, and that's one thing in Washington, there's no plan book saying, hey, when you move up to this role, you're going to learn these different, jobs and duties. And here's like how you have to learn these skills and traits to manage. You're literally drinking from a fire hose and you're trying to figure out like, when am I going to get my legs underneath me to actually start going? But that's the one thing that I know when you got in that role from my perspective is that you brought up a lot of, and you mentioned a lot of great folks around you that can help you, do your job effectively, where you can kind of, give them their assignments to do that. But that's one thing I saw when you were there is we didn't skip a beat in the field. There wasn't like this, oh, Natalie's there. Like I didn't notice anything. Like we were just, grooving like we always have. But what was your sense now that you now have to talk to an administration where before you maybe saw like a congressman or a senator come into your office, but now you're dealing with an administration, you're dealing with now a president. What was that like? That first trip. I imagine you've been to the White House numerous times.
Mhm.
What was that like for you?
Well, first of all, I was like a West Wing nerd growing up. And then I forgot what the other Netflix one with
House
the
of Cards.
House of Cards, all of that stuff, right? And then I'm going in there going, somebody freaking, again, I'm keeping it close, right? I mean, if anybody tells you that they don't walk in and at least the first couple times, then there's something, because that's like that's what we all aspire. It's for these people. That's what we do every day. It's to make sure that what they're coming up with and all of that we're enforcing, etc. So while it was very bedazzling and all of this, again, you don't have time. It's like, because you're getting your butt is on the constantly. As far as talking to these different people, I think a couple of things. The military certainly gave me, because I was a station briefer and all of that stuff. So you can't let the titles get you crazy, because again, the higher they go, the less they know about one thing in particular. It's so many things. You're the SME going in, so they need to learn from you. So that I learned that in the military, and also as the two of you can certainly relate in your lives, in your areas of responsibility of your field offices. Seattle is not the most friendly when it comes to immigration enforcement.
Yeah.
So from day one, moving all the way up, I was used to addressing generally a very contentious audience as it relates to, the different policymakers, the government officials, the NGOs. So when your feet are to the fire like that constantly in this part of the country, Ninth Circuit, all that stuff, it's just on steroids when you get up there. So
Yeah.
all of those things were building blocks to sort of land me in the 3 years that I was at headquarters, for sure.
Well, that's a great place for us to bring us kind of to a close, Nathalie. We'd love to have you on again and do a part two and get into a couple more things. But hey, we definitely appreciate you coming on, talking about how you got in with the government, your military career, right up until you were the EAD for enforcement removal operations. And it is fascinating. And both John and I worked for you, so we know how you were as a leader. When I was told that Miss Asher was on the phone and I needed to take the call, I would always breathe real deep. I'd be like, all right, what is Miss Asher going to tell me on the phone? But, I think we all appreciated you as a leader, and we'd love to have you on and talk about your story a little bit more.
Thanks so much, you guys. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
All right,
All right,
Nathalie,
we'll
thank
talk
you.
to you soon, Nat.